One day, God spoke to Jonah and said, "Travel to Nineveh and tell them about me." Jonah said, "No way," and jumped on a ship going the other way. God sent a mighty storm to stop him. Jonah told the crew what he had done, and they tossed him overboard. A whale swallowed him up, and Jonah said, "I'm sorry, Lord." And after 3 days, the whale spit him out again.
Wait, that's in the Bible?
Yeah, there's tons of stories that you might not expect in the Bible.
Like what? Like, isn't it all just one big long sermon?
Well, there was a guy that fell asleep and fell out of a window because one sermon went on so long.
Well, are there any miracles?
Yeah, Jesus turned water into a special party drink once.
Talking donkeys?
Yep. It's all in there. Pretty cool, right?
Hey, good morning. Welcome to Christ Church. We're a church about lifting lives, elevating Christ, a church for those not here yet. If I haven't mentioned yet, my name is Nathan. I'm a vicar here at Christ Church, which is a fancy way of saying pastor in training. Whether you're joining us here in the East Auditorium, joining us over in West, or joining us online, welcome. Thank you for choosing to be a part of Christ Church this morning. And as you've heard, we are finishing up our message series, Wait, That's in the Bible, where we're looking at these different stories in the Bible, and whether they're weird or bizarre or funny or surprising, we know that in all of it, God is working through it. And whether the stories are weird, whether our lives are weird, we know that God is at work. We'll have to see you back next week and throughout the month of December as we go through our Christmas message series, which is Ghosts of Christmas Past. We're looking at these ghosts or these bad or harder stories that come out of Jesus' own genealogy, his own family line, and the weird but the hard stuff that comes out of that. Up for today, we're finishing up Wait, That's in the Bible, and looking at one more weird story, and one more story that you probably didn't know. And the story that you probably didn't know is the story of Balaam. Now, if you do know something about Balaam, I guarantee it's the one thing people know about the story of Balaam, is that he hangs out with this talking donkey. The only thing we know about Balaam, usually, is that Balaam hangs out with a talking donkey. And like Shrek, he often gets annoyed with his talking donkey friend. But we'll get there in a little bit. First, we got to set up how do we get to Balaam and his story, and what's the context of what is happening. So this whole story takes place in the book of Numbers, and it's surrounding this idea of righteousness. And so what righteousness is being in right standing, and usually who you are in right standing with is God. So in the Bible, when you're talking about a righteous person, they are in right standing with God. So if you do bad things, if you sin, that would make you unrighteous. You no longer are in right standing with God, and something has to happen to justify you or bring you back into right standing. And so the way someone would get back into right standing with God might be offering sacrifices or something like that. For today, we have Jesus who justifies us, and so we have it maybe a little bit easier. But the Jewish people back then usually had to do some other things. And the Jewish people at this time, in the book of Numbers, there's a lot of stories about them not being so righteous, about their unrighteousness. If you were here a couple weeks ago, Pastor Andrew talked about the story of the manna. And even though God is providing for his people this food every day, they still complained. They still yearned to be back in Egypt, where they were slaves. And so as a result of their unrighteousness in this story and a couple other stories, the Jewish people end up wandering in the wilderness for 40 years before they enter into the promised land. And the story of Balaam takes place at the very tail end of this, where this unrighteous people are finally, through God's faithfulness to them, getting closer and closer to entering into the promised land, which is thinking pretty close to modern-day Israel. And so the entire story of Balaam takes place in these 3 chapters of Numbers 22, 23, and 24. There's one other small reference to Balaam elsewhere in the Bible, but pretty much his whole story is contained in these 3 chapters. And it sets up like this. Then the people of Israel traveled to the plains of Moab and camped east of the Jordan River across from Jericho. Now, this east of the Jordan River across from Jericho is just east of modern-day Israel and modern-day Jordan. So the Israelites are right on the doorstep of the Promised Land. And the Moabites were kind of like cousins of the Israelites. Where the Israelites are descended from Abraham, the Moabites are descended from Abraham's relative Lot. and specifically from one of his very unrighteous sons. And so the Jewish people and the Moabites, not exactly friends, often didn't get along. But they're one of the last places the Jewish people have to travel through before they're back in the Promised Land. Balak, son of Zippor, the Moabite king, had seen everything the Israelites did to the Amorites. So the king of Moab, the king of this place, had seen what had just happened to the people they had just gone through, which was the Amorites. And it wasn't good for the Amorites. The Israelites defeated the Amorites. And when the people of Moab saw how many Israelites there were, they were terrified. Now, Numbers is famous for its numbers, and starting off with a list of how many people there were in each tribe, and specifically usually talking about the fighting aged men, and there was about 600,000 of those at the beginning of Numbers. And so if you extrapolate that out to include women and children and older men, it was probably maybe 2 million or so Israelites. This horde of Jewish people, this horde of Israelites are coming on the land of Moab. And the Moabites and Balak, the king, were terrified because 2 million people basically about to invade your land to try to get through it. And so the king of Moab said to the elders of Midian, "This mob will devour everything in sight, like an ox devours grass in the field." So Balak, king of Moab, sent messengers to call Balaam, son of Beor, who was living in his native land of Pethor near the Euphrates River. So probably out towards modern-day Iraq, so way further east. And so Balak sends for Balaam, who's not Jewish. He's not a Moabite either, but he's famous for blessing people and they are being blessed, or cursing people and they being cursed. And so Balak's hoping that he brings Balaam over. Balaam will curse the Israelites, and Balak and the Moabites will be able to win the subsequent battles. And his message said, "Look, a vast horde of people has arrived from Egypt. They cover the face of the earth, and they are threatening me. Please come and curse these people for me, because they are too powerful for me. Then perhaps I will be able to conquer them and drive them from the land. I know that blessings fall on any people you bless, on curses fall on people who you curse. If you do this for me, Balaam, we will win, because your curses are good, they work. Your blessings, they work too." And that'll be important later. And Balak's messengers, who were elders of Moab and Midian, set out with money to pay Balaam to place a curse upon Israel. They went to Balaam and delivered Balak's message to him. And so Balak doesn't go himself. He's the king. He's busy. He's got stuff to do. But he sends some elders, some important people from his region, and he sends them out with money basically to bribe Balaam to curse the Israelites for him, a payment for this curse. And they get there and they deliver this message to Balaam, and Balaam says, "Stay here overnight. In the morning I will tell you whatever the Lord directs me to say." So the officials from Moab stayed there with Balaam. Now Balaam isn't Jewish, but clearly he knows of the Lord and he trusts in the Lord, and he knows that whatever he tries to do doesn't matter if God is not on his side. Right? If he tries to bless the people, but God doesn't want that to work, they won't be blessed. And if he tries to curse them, but God doesn't want them to be cursed, that won't work either. And so Balaam trusts in God. And that night God came to Balaam and asked, "Who are these men visiting you?" Balaam said to God, "Balak, son of Zippor, king of Moab, have sent me this message. Look, a vast horde of people has arrived from Egypt, and they cover the face of the earth. Come and curse these people for me. Then perhaps I will be able to stand up to them and drive them from the land." But God told Balaam, "Do not go with them. You are not to curse these people, for they have been blessed." And already we see God and his faithfulness. Because the Jewish people, the Israelites, are God's chosen, holy, set-apart people who have been blessed by God. And they are his people, whether they are righteous or whether they are unrighteous, whether they follow God or they don't follow God. God has chosen them. They are his people, and so they are blessed by God. So that even though they live unrighteously, even though they keep doing the wrong thing, even though Numbers is filled with stories of them messing up, God remains faithful to them and does not allow Balaam to curse his people, because they are his people. They're the ones he's chosen. Now, that doesn't mean they're better or like special in any kind of way. It just means they are God's chosen people. Now, this blessing was for them, but it was really for the whole world, because the idea was through this blessing of the Jewish people, God would then be able to bless the whole world. They were blessed by God to bless everyone else. And usually that fell short of this. They didn't bless the rest of the world because of their unrighteousness, their unfaithfulness. They didn't follow through on this blessing. But eventually we'll get to Jesus, a Jewish person, a descendant of God's chosen people, and he blesses the rest of the world. But God does not allow Balaam to curse his people. The next morning, Balaam got up and told Balak's officials, "Go on home. The Lord will not let me go with you. I won't take the bribe. I won't take the money. I will not curse God's people." So the Moabite officials returned to King Balak and reported, "Balaam refused to come with us." So Balak tries again. This time he sent a larger number of even more distinguished officials than those he had sent the first time. And he probably sends more money. He ups the bribe. He ups the number of people. He ups how important the people are. Surely this time Balaam will come with, if he sees how serious I am, if he sees what I'm willing to offer, if he sees the importance of the people that I'm sending. But Balaam responded to Balak's messengers, "Even if Balak were to give me his palace filled with silver and gold, even if you were to make me king, even if you're giving me all the riches of the world, it would not matter. I would be powerless to do anything against the will of the Lord, my God. My blessings only work if God's behind them. My curses only work if God is behind those. And so even if I took this bribe, even if I accepted it, it doesn't matter. It won't work because God is not on my side. But stay here one more night and I will see if the Lord has anything else to say to me. I'll see if God's changed his mind this time." And weirdly, he does. That night, God came to Balaam and told him, "Since these men have come for you, get up and go with them. But do only what I tell you to do." Now, translating the Bible is not an exact science. This originally was written in Hebrew. Of course, we're reading an English translation of it. The translation we use at Christ Church is the New Living Translation, or the NLT. And this is how the NLT chooses to translate this. But this middle section, which I've bracketed, is really weird in the Hebrew. And so another potential reading of it would be something like, "If the men have come to call you, get up and go with them." And so it goes from a sense to an if. And so the way Balaam interprets what God is telling him is that since they've come, you can go with them. But maybe what God meant was that if they come again in the morning, then you can go with them. But don't be so eager that you go without another invitation. So next morning, Balaam got up, saddled his donkey, and started off with the Moabite officials. He didn't wait for them to come again. Instead, he was eager. Maybe he'll get paid. Maybe he'll get some of this bribe. Maybe he's being greedy. And so he goes without waiting for another invitation. He goes with them right away. And even though God told him he could go with them, because Balaam's heart wasn't in the right place as he went, God was angry. He was angry that Balaam was going. He was angry that he was so impatient and just wanted to go right away. He was angry that he didn't wait for another invitation. So he sent the angel of the Lord to stand in the road to block his way as Balaam and two servants were riding along. So Balaam and his servants and his donkeys, they're riding along, and the angel of the Lord stands in the way, stands on the path. This is kind of how I imagine this scene would have looked. Of course, there would have been two more donkeys and servants. But if I'm Balaam and I'm the donkey, I'm terrified. I'm running away. I'm not continuing to walk along this path. Clearly, someone's trying to give me a message not to go. And Balaam's donkey gets the message, but apparently Balaam doesn't. Balaam's donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing in the road with a drawn sword in his hand. The donkey bolted off the road into a field, but Balaam beat it and turned it back onto the road. So Balaam doesn't see this angel. Apparently not. The donkey runs away into the field, but Balaam beats it back onto the road, and they must make their way around the angel, and they keep going. Then the angel of the Lord stood at a place where the road narrowed between two vineyard walls. God gets a little smarter. He's like, well, I can't go around the field if I'm in between the walls. And when the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, it tried to squeeze by, did the old Midwest thing of, let me squeeze past you there, and crushed Balaam's foot against the wall. So Balaam beat the donkey again. The donkey doesn't want to get beat, so it's like, all right, I got to get past this angel. I know if I try to avoid this, Balaam's going to get mad at me again. So it tries to squeeze just past, but as it's squeezing past, it brushes Balaam's foot against the wall, and it crushes it. And this, of course, makes Balaam angry. Balaam beats his donkey again. Then the angel of the Lord moved farther down the road and stood in a place too narrow for the donkey to get by at all. God gets even smarter. The angel gets even smarter and stands where it's just him, and there's no way for the donkey and Balaam to get past. And this time, when the donkey saw the angel, it lay down. It just gives up. It lays down under Balaam. And in a fit of rage, Balaam is so angry. Balaam's so impatient. Balaam's probably so greedy. He beats the animal again with his staff. Now, here's where the story gets weird. It's already been weird, but it gets weirder. Then the Lord gave the donkey the ability to speak. What have I done to you that deserves your beating me 3 times, it asked Balaam. And Balaam is so angry that apparently he's unfazed by a speaking donkey. He says, you have made me look like a fool. If I had a sword with me, I would kill you. Balaam's so angry at his donkey that this talking donkey, he's not even worried about that part. He just wants to kill the donkey. But I am the same donkey you've ridden all your life. Have I ever done anything like this before? And finally, after a whole day of not being self-reflective at all, after a day of anger and impatience and greed, Balaam has some self-reflection and realizes, no, today's different. Something is different. Something's going on that's not normal. After this self-reflection, the Lord finally opens Balaam's eyes. Balaam finally sees the angel of the Lord standing in the roadway with a drawn sword in his hand. And so Balaam bows his head. He falls face down on the ground before him, maybe in worship, probably in fear of this angel. Why did you beat your donkey those 3 times? The angel demanded. Look, I've come to block your way because you are stubbornly resisting me. 3 times the donkey saw me and shied away. Otherwise, I certainly would have killed you by now and spared the donkey. This donkey that you keep getting mad at, this donkey that you keep beating, this donkey that you keep abusing, that donkey saved your life, dude. You should be thankful for the donkey. But instead, you are angry. Then Balaam confessed to the angel of the Lord, I have sinned. Balaam's self-reflective here. I didn't realize you were standing in the road to block my way. Clearly, you don't want me to keep going. Clearly, I'm in the wrong here. So I will return home if you're against my going. Clearly, you don't want me to keep going. Clearly, you don't want me to curse God's people. Clearly, you don't want me to go meet with Balak. So I will return. I will turn around and go back home. But the angel says, nah, it's fine. You can keep going. Go with these men, but say only what I tell you to say. So Balaam went on with Balak's officials. So why is God stopping Balaam but allowing him to keep going? And I think the reason is God isn't mad that Balaam went, but it's how he went. It's his heart as he went. He was doing it impatiently. He was doing it with greed. He wasn't doing it out of faithfulness, but out of his own desires. And once Balaam has the self-reflection and understands what God actually wants from him, then God allows him to keep going. It's not always what we do, but it's how we do it, our heart as we do it. And so Balaam eventually gets there. He meets with Balak, They do some weird sacrifices and things that Balak thinks is going to help with the curse. And Balak tells Balaam, all right, now you're going to go curse the Israelites for me. And so Balaam gets up in front of the people, and this was the message Balaam delivered. Balak summoned me to come from Aram. The king of Moab brought me from the eastern hills. Come, he said, curse Jacob for me. Come and announce Israel's doom. But how can I curse those whom God has not cursed? How can I condemn those whom the Lord has not condemned? I see them from the cliff tops. I watch them from the hills. I see a people who live by themselves, set apart from other nations. Who can count Jacob's descendants as numerous as dust? Who can count even a fourth of Israel's people? Let me die like the righteous. Let my life end like theirs. Even though Balak sent Balaam to curse, Balaam doesn't curse the people. Instead, he starts listing off their good qualities. He starts listing off how God has blessed the Israelites. And how even though they're unfaithful and unrighteous, God has made them righteous. And Balaam wants to live, Balaam wants to die like the Jewish people, because they are God's people. Balak apparently doesn't get the hint that this isn't going to work, and so he asks Balaam to do it again, thinking a second time would go better. It doesn't. And he asks a third time, and it doesn't go better either. And at the end of the third speech Balaam gives, Balaam closes his speech like this: Blessed is everyone who blesses you, O Israel, and cursed is everyone who curses you. Balak sends Balaam to curse the Israelites, but instead he blesses them. Blessed is everyone who blesses you, and cursed is everyone who curses you. Cursed is Moab, cursed is Balak, because they are cursing Israel. And so Balaam was sent to curse. Balaam was sent to try to destroy the Israelites. But instead, he blesses them. And God uses what was meant for evil, this curse from Balaam, but instead he uses it for good, for Balaam blesses the Israelites. And the story takes some twists and turns from there. You can read the end of Book of Numbers to find out all about it. The Israelites end up making their way through Moab. They end up entering into the Promised Land, and at the end of Joshua, they end up being in control of the Promised Land. The Israelites are back in their land, and it is good. So God took what was meant for evil and uses it for good. And God in this shows his faithfulness even to his unfaithful people. Because the Jewish people were not always faithful, the Jewish people were not always righteous, but because they were God's chosen, holy, set-apart people, God was going to bless them. Even if they didn't deserve it, even if they didn't do all the right things all the time, God was going to bless them. And weirdly, he uses an unfaithful person to do it. Because Balaam isn't a Jewish person, didn't always do the right thing. When God didn't want him to go. Beat his donkey when the donkey was trying to save him. Balaam, this unfaithful man, is sent by God to bless these unfaithful people. Because God is faithful, even when his people aren't. God's faithfulness isn't contingent on his people being faithful to him. He is faithful because that is who he is towards his people. And the good news for us is that because of Jesus, we too are his people. That even though most of us aren't Jewish, because of what Jesus has done for us, we are considered a part of God's people. Because God sent Jesus into the world as a Jewish person, blessed by God, to bless the rest of us, to bless the rest of the world. And when Jesus went to the cross, he took on the unrighteousness, our unrighteousness, the unrighteousness of the world, the sin, the brokenness of the world, and he put it to death. And through his resurrection from the grave, he conquered over sin, he conquered over death, he conquered over the devil. Because God is faithful to you. And that is good. And it is good for you, whether you've been faithful or not. Because God loves you. God cares for you. So even if you've never been to church before, even if you've done bad things, even if God is standing in your path and you keep trying to go forward, God is faithful to you. Because that is who he is. God is faithful. Now, of course, as a response to God's faithfulness to us, we are called to be faithful to him and to love him. And of course, love our neighbor as ourselves and do the things God has called us to do. But know that even when we don't, even when we fall short, even when we sin, God remains faithful to you. God is faithful to you. So respond to his faith to us with faithfulness of your own. Let's pray. Gracious Almighty God, we thank you for your faithfulness to us, that even when we fall short, even when we sin, even when we mess up, you remain faithful to us. God, we thank you for the story of Balaam and what we can learn from it, that even though it's weird, even though Balaam doesn't always do the right thing, that you still choose to use him, that you are a God who uses unfaithful people to bring blessings to the world. We thank you too for the Israelites, that even though they messed up, they fell short, that you used them to bless the rest of the world. God, help us to be people who are a blessing to the rest of the world, who are a church for those not here yet, to be people that through our faithfulness are able to show others your love, your grace, your mercy, and your faithfulness to them. Jesus, we ask that even when we aren't faithful, we too still receive your grace, and we thank you that we trust and know and have hope that we do. Jesus, we love you so much. We thank you for your grace and your faithfulness to us. I pray these things in your name. Amen.